I want to first preface this story by saying that you can never judge a book by its cover. I still have not quite recovered from the events that took place on that late summer evening several years ago. I live in a fairly large farmhouse, seemingly in the middle of nowhere. There was almost no traffic or any other people for most of the year. That is, until the last 2 weeks of summer. Every summer, my hometown hosts this summer fest, where there is a ton of music and food, and its location is just down the road from my farmhouse. All day and night, I hear loud music, the commotion of people, fireworks, and just about anything else you can think of. Most nights, I'll usually just sit outside, listen to the music from the festival, and watch people walk away from my property to get to their cars, which are parked in a field about 100 yards or so down from my house. The Summerfest is a big deal where I live, so parking fills up fast and people park all the way down by my usually quaint street. Unfortunately, it is not uncommon for me to have some drunk patrons of the festival on my front lawn. They are almost always harmless and end up walking down the street just a few minutes later. As a result of the proximity to the festival from my house, I have a very good relationship with the sheriff, who I've only had to call once or twice for nothing serious, but just loitering. Well, this year was no different. Every night I sat outside and watched the people leave the event. Men and women of all ages were filled with glee from the exciting time they shared at the concerts that night. On the last night of the festival, around midnight, the last of the lights were being shut down, and the people were walking by my home became smaller and smaller. I was getting ready to go inside for the night when I saw one final group of people walk by my house. They were probably in their mid-20s if I had to guess, and it just seemed rather loud and boisterous, which was not uncommon for this hour of the night. The group of people was not what bothered me though. It was who was following the group of people that gave me a slight pause. At a little bit of a distance, maybe 10 feet or so, was another woman. From a distance in the dark, she looked pretty, but a bit off. She was wearing a pink dress and had blonde hair about shoulder length. When she got parallel to my door, she stopped in the middle of the road and turned her entire body to face my house. I stood and stared back for a moment, but then she turned back to the road and kept walking, now probably about 20 feet from the rest of the people. It was freaky, honestly, but nothing too scary, really. I thought maybe it was just some young girl who perhaps had a little bit too much fun, if you know what I mean, and just got lost looking at my house. As I said before, it's a fairly large home with really high and pointed rooftops. I didn't let the girl in pink bother me for much longer than a few minutes. I got ready for bed, as I usually do, and went upstairs where my bedroom was located. My bedroom overlooked the front of the house, so I could see the road, and just as I was going to lie down, out of my bedroom window, I saw the girl in pink standing in the middle of the road facing my home. Now, this is where I felt a little bit uneasy. I jumped over my dresser and called the sheriff, but he didn't answer. Luckily, I had his personal cell, so I sent him a text message just to alert him that there was a strange young woman from the festival standing outside of my house. Now, clearly at this point she wasn't doing anything wrong or even on my property, but I just had a bad feeling and wanted my friend to check it out. When I looked back out the window, she was gone, and no sooner after I looked up out of the window, I heard a loud bang downstairs. I was crippled in fear. I had sprung from my bed to the top of the staircase and saw that my front door was wide open, with nothing but the moonlight shining in. I heard giggles and the light footprints of someone running on their toes. I could not believe that someone was actually in my house. I tried to sneak down the stairs quietly and make a run for the door, and as I got to the bottom step, I heard a loud and unnerving voice. "Hey, where do you think you're going?" I turned and only got a quick glimpse. It was the girl in pink. She was standing slightly hunched over with both hands behind her back as if she was concealing something. She was smiling, and I could hear a low giggle, barely audible through her teeth. I turned almost immediately and ran out of the front door. To my absolute horror, she was right behind me, running with one arm waving frantically and the other still concealed behind her back. "I'm coming for you," she said with her insidious and terrifying voice. I ran several yards down the road with her right on my tail, and thankfully my sheriff friend had received my text message because with almost no time to spare, he pulled up beside me. Not fazing this girl at all, we both kept running. My sheriff friend got out of his vehicle and tackled the girl into the grass on the side of the road, and then called for backup. The young woman could not remember her name. She kept telling the cops that she lived there and that I had broken into her home. The most terrifying thing about all of this is that still to this day, the woman has no confirmed identity. She had no ID when they found her. She did not know her name, her age, where she was from. All she claimed was that she lived in the house. She was taken to a hospital of some kind where she's being taken care of. It's so scary to me that this woman came from the festival in her nice pink dress and intended on causing me harm with no other backstory. It scares the heck out of me that nobody knows where she came from that night. There were no missing person reports, nothing. This woman came out of nowhere, and it just goes to show you that anybody, anywhere, can cause you harm. I have seen and read a lot of stories on the internet, and I was always very quick to dismiss them as fake. After the experience I had in putting this into writing, I can now see that many of these stories can definitely be true. Life really is stranger than fiction sometimes. My experience seemed so unreal and unlikely to happen, and yet it did happen, and it was truly the most horrific experience of my entire life. To protect my hometown and everybody involved, I'm going to change the names of the people in this story. The night started like any other typical summer night, and I gathered with my friends. It was late in the summer season, and my hometown holds a pretty big fair to cap off the end of the summertime festivities. I attended the fair with my two best friends, Kevin and Jeff. Once arriving at the fairgrounds, we decided to meet up with my girlfriend Jamie and our two friends, Amanda and Jill. We were having a blast, eating food, checking out the local items for sale at the tents, listening to music, and walking around just taking in the environment. Something about the fair brings out some strange people, and this was evident when we came across a homeless-looking man dressed as a clown. This almost creature-looking man with hanging skin, a red rubber nose, and a clown wig came from behind us. He grabbed my friend Kevin and asked for some spare change. It was harmless, honestly, but just kind of gave our entire group a jump. After creating a nice distance away from the homeless clown man, we decided to take a break from walking and laugh off the entirely wild and weird situation. That is when we noticed a man in the distance. He was wearing a red mask, black hood, jeans, and some work boots. And most frighteningly was that he was holding an axe of some kind. It's important to note that at this point, we were on the midway of the fair, which contained tons of rides and games as far as you could see. So, even though this man gave me some pause, I was not really concerned because there were fun houses and haunted house attractions all over this section of the fair. A few minutes later, we decided to do some rides so each one of us could have some alone time with our dates. It was nice for a moment until I noticed the red-masked man again. We were on one of those old-fashioned wooden roller coasters when I noticed the man was standing behind the attraction. As soon as the ride ended, I kind of made a dash towards the exit of the ride. Kevin and Jeff were kind of annoyed and finally yelled for me to stop. Several yards away from the roller coaster, I told the group about the red-masked man and how I wanted to tell some type of fair security just to see if this man was in fact part of the fair. The group laughed and told me to calm down. They pointed to one of the haunted houses, and a zombie stood outside, scaring people in line. A few more exhibits down was a fun house where a killer clown was messing with the guests. They told me to relax, and that the Axeman had to be part of the fair. I agreed and went back to trying to have a good time with my friends. Toward the end of the night, we were just getting ready to leave and head back to Jamie's house for some night swimming when Jeff wanted to get some ice cream. We agreed to stop on the way out. While Kevin, Jeff, Amanda, and Jill waited in line, Me and Jamie sat off to the side and just people watched, until Jamie's face turned ghost white. Once I noticed her expression changed, I turned and noticed that the Axeman was standing in the distance. I decided no more games, and I ran after the man. Full speed, I chased him through one of those animal tents, but due to the exuberant amount of people, I lost him. When I ran after him and he fled, that almost gave me some solace that this man was in fact just part of the fair, and he was messing with us the entire night. I wish this is where my horror story ended. A few hours later, we were still at Jamie's, sitting around the fire. It was just the six of us enjoying some conversation and laughter. Our bliss suddenly turned into panic when we heard some shuffling through the forest that sits directly behind Jamie's house. We stopped talking and stared into the thick, dark trees. All we could hear was the crackling of the fire and the stillness of the night as we stared into the dark void. Then out of the darkness was the Axeman and his red mask. He ran full speed out of the forest, axe in hand. The expressionless red mask gave the Axeman an even more petrifying and menacing appearance. This could not be happening, we thought as we ran. The house was too far away, so we ran into the pool house, which was just a small little room which had all the pool toys and chemicals for the pool. We tried screaming for help, but like every cliche out there, Jamie truly did live in the middle of nowhere, and all of our cell phones were in the house with our clothes, since we were only wearing our bathing suits. I arrived at the pool house first and opened the door. I just about pushed everyone in and made my way in last, and just as I tried to shut the door, the man threw down his axe and sliced the top of my arm. I was grimacing in pain as I was able to grab the door and shut it and lock it. The man beat on the door like a horror movie villain. We screamed and cried, but by some luck, Jamie had a landline phone in the small pool house, and we dialed 911. The Axeman must have heard the conversation because he immediately stopped trying to break down the door. We peered out the window and noticed that the Axeman was standing there, facing the door but not moving. His black eyes stared out of the red mask, wielding his axe with two hands. He then lifted the axe and overhead threw it at the door, and then just stood there. After a couple of seconds, he removed the mask, and he was not a he at all, but a she. The deranged axe-wielding lunatic was a beautiful woman. She had makeup running down her face as if she had been crying all night long. She fell to her knees and began to scream and cry. The emotions we all felt in this moment were almost indescribable. That is when I noticed Jeff looked like he was going to be sick. The woman with the axe was his ex-girlfriend from college, whom we had never met. He was in shock and was at a complete loss of words. No sooner after this revelation did the cops show up and promptly arrest the axe woman. We all gave our statements and then somehow went back to our lives. I know writing this story just how ludicrous it all sounds, and how it may be a stretch for some of you to believe the story, but I know the fear I felt that night will never be matched, starting with the uneasiness from the fair, followed by the full-on panic I felt when she chased us from the forest. I will never forget the emotions I felt that night. My advice to everyone: if something does not seem right, chances are you're right, and please just say something. If I would have gone to the fair security when I first saw the axe wielder, this night may have been avoided. Always be aware of the strangeness around you. So, this story is a bit unsettling and weird, more than just your typical scary story. The events of this summer night I did not really consider scary until years later, when I really reflected on the night. I'm 30 years old now, but was only 15 during the events of this strange night. The events started fairly normal, a bunch of high school kids just hanging out, thinking we were cool. It was a group of about 10 of us, if I remember correctly. We decided to post up toward the back of the beach where they were having some type of summer firework night. We honestly were decent kids and were just talking, laughing, telling jokes, and trying to impress the girls. During our time hanging out in the back, we were approached by a very strange-looking man. He was an average height, a little thick in the belly, almost like a beer belly, bald but sporting the hair ring, very patchy facial hair, and just horrible skin. He approached us with great confidence, and he said in a stern voice, "You guys waiting for the ship as well?" Thinking this was more comical than scary, we kind of just laughed and responded with, "The ship? What are you talking about?" The man smiled and flashed his disgusting yellow teeth. Again, in his confident voice, he said, "Yeah, the ship from space. Are you guys here to board it as well?" Well, being kids, we just thought that this was a major joke. We laughed hysterically and just thought that this guy had a lot to drink or something along those lines. After we composed ourselves, we finally responded to the crazed man by saying, "Where's the ship going?" He responded confidently, "The Andromeda Galaxy, of course." That was the last straw for us. We were just about hunched over in pain, we were laughing so hard. Well, the man finally realized that we were laughing at him, and he changed his tune real quick. The confident voice suddenly became faint, and the man said, "Go ahead and laugh at me. When they come, you will see." We basically responded by saying whatever and decided to step away from this crazy guy. But the guy started to follow us, and now he was irate. He basically chased us and was telling us about the aliens. Finally, after a few minutes of this and a lot of stares from the people at the beach, I turned around and said in my blunt 15-year-old voice, "Dude, leave us alone. We don't want any part of your ships or aliens." Still treating this as a joke, but more annoyed and creeped out than anything else, we just kept walking. The man finally yelled, "Stop!" We all turned and looked at the creepy UFO man, and he said, almost in tears now, "I've seen you in my dreams. You've been on the ship with me. They chose us." Officially creeped out now, I pushed the guy down, who surprisingly went down like he weighed nothing. When he was on the ground, he just sat there and laughed. With all the commotion, we noticed a lot of people at the beach forming a circle around us, as if we were going to fight. The crazy man got up and started to walk around in a circle of people that formed, and started to ask them in an almost desperate voice now, "Are any of you going up? They'll be here soon. We need to get ready." And the poor deranged man was met with tons of laughter. I started to actually feel bad for him. It seemed like the poor guy really was suffering from some sort of crazy delusion. While the man was interrogating the other people nearby, we used that opportunity to make our way to the parking lot. Honestly, we were done with this guy. It was just starting to get concerning, and we really didn't want any trouble. Once we got to the parking lot, we waited by the main road where my mom was going to pick us up along with my 3 friends. Since she wasn't there yet, we just waited by the entrance of the lot until my mom got there. Disturbingly, across from the lot in a heavily wooded area, we saw the creepy alien man just standing there, staring at us. We did not say anything or provoke him this time. We just watched and waited anxiously for my mom. As we stood there, we noticed that the man just kept pointing up to the sky. He did not look like he was saying anything, but we would not have been able to hear him if he was, because he was probably about 50 yards away. He was making these strange movements as well. It was just deeply, deeply disturbing. In the distance, we finally saw my mom driving up in our green Windstar van. As we approached the door of the van, we noticed that the man was now somewhat rapidly approaching us. Not running, but walking briskly, I would say. We started to move fast, not really knowing if this guy was dangerous or not. And as I got into the passenger side of the van, the man waved from the side of the road, and I just barely heard him say, "I'll see you up there," as he smiled awkwardly at the van. It was not until years later when I was telling this story that I realized just how off and disturbing it really was. We had no idea if this guy could have caused us harm, if he was insane, or if by some crazy chance there was truth to his delusion. I often used to wonder what happened to that guy. I never saw him again. I still attend that beach every year, and honestly, I always go back to that spot at the back of the park to see if the strange man ever comes back. Either way, It was a very strange and interesting story I really wanted to share. Just makes you wonder what happens in some people's heads and what they think they see.